The razor wire removal at the border. This is what we know. The Supreme Court has come down with a 5-4 decision on whether the Biden administration has the right to actively remove via Border Patrol this concertina or razor wire. I believe barbed wire started with cattle ranchers in the American West, and then made its way to the front in World War One, and then it became much more widespread. And obviously, razor wire is a form of barbed wire. Anyway, but they've been putting this barbed wire in a few places on the soil of the state of Texas. Yes, it's obviously also U.S. land, but it is Texas soil, and they're putting this razor wire down so that migrants will stop rushing through in these areas. And this is meant to make it easier for Border Patrol to do their jobs and Texas National Guard to assist in this process. I would be interested to see how both sides would play out in these legal arguments. I mean, there's a few points to the razor wire side of the equation, or the pro razor wire. I don't know how else we say this. I mean, the state of Texas, effectively. Attorney General Paxton and Governor Abbott. We reached out to Governor Abbott. He's abroad right now, but we'll be talking to him hopefully next week about this. There are a few things. One is there's an argument that Texas has, as a state, sovereign right to put up barbed wire on Texas soil, and this shouldn't be something, they have police powers, and if they want to put barbed wire on one side of the Rio Grande, they should be able to put barbed wire on one side of the Rio Grande. That's part of the argument. Another part of the argument is that the Biden, I was going to say Obama administration. Whoops, that's a slip. The Biden,
some people would say that's accurate.
I know. Yeah. The Biden administration has neglected its duties, effectively is engaging in nullification of federal immigration law, and therefore created an emergency situation akin to an invasion, which under constitutional authority, a state can respond to with, effectively, sorry, guys, this is an emergency, we're not waiting for the federal government. If all of a sudden North Korea invades Oregon, Oregon's allowed to fight back and do what it can and use the National Guard. They don't have to say, wait, where's my congressional authorization for war? Different, obviously. You're talking about people migrating, not an invasion of North Korean tanks, but you get the idea. That's part of this as well. But Clay, the area where I think this gets, first of all, the politics of this look terrible for the Biden administration in election year. So I think it's a political loser for them because they want to make it easier. It's not, they're having Border Patrol cut the wire and remove the wire. It's not even like they're saying, well, we don't want to do this, or we're not. They're actively withdrawing or removing these barbed wire areas. And beyond that, the justification the Biden administration's had, as this has made its way up through court, federal court, appeals court, is that this interferes with Border Patrol's right to do their job. So part of their explanation for this, the Biden administration explanation, is, well, we can't process migrants in these areas the way we want to because of the razor wire. I think they're making arguments there in clearly bad faith, and they just want the wide open border to continue, and everybody sees it.
All right, I'm going to put my lawyer hat on here, and I'm going to sound like a super nerd. And I would just ask lawyers that are out there listening, particularly if you have had immigration law experience, tell me whether or not you agree with this. 800-282-2882. So we don't have a written opinion, really, right? So this is just a 5-4 decision involving a Fifth Circuit issue, sending it back. Ultimately, lawyers try to distill every case into a single sentence, Buck. This is one of the things you learn in law school. What's the question of the case? And to me, the ultimate question of the case here, and I'm answering this as if I'm Amy Coney Barrett, who I believe was a law professor at Notre Dame, and this is one of the ways that you would instruct young lawyers. The first most basic principle here that I think has to be asked is, who is the decider? In a dispute between the federal government and a state government over a border security, immigration-related issue, who is the decider? Is it the state of Texas and their chief executive, Governor Greg Abbott, or, by the way, who also went to Vanderbilt Law School with me, and I'd be curious just have like an actual legal discussion with him on this because he has super smart lawyers advising him too, or is it the United States with their chief executive, Joe Biden, as president, right? I think what Amy Coney Barrett here is deciding is this is a federal government issue, and the opinion of the president and the executive branch overrides the opinion of the state executive because federal power trumps state power when it comes to this particular issue of immigration law. Okay, so that is what I think she is doing in general. And I think what she would say, again, I'm trying to answer because not a written opinion. I think what Amy Coney Barrett would say from a presidential level is that means the president basically has supreme authority on border security related issues. And so if Donald Trump is in office, he's going to immediately get sued, Buck, for every decision that he makes. You know this. I know this. You're going to try to build a wall. There's going to be every lawsuit known to man that can be filed. What Amy Coney Barrett is saying here is, I am going to defer to the chief executive of the United States government, the president, to make decisions as it pertains to immigration law. His power is the supreme. He is the decider. Now, if you have an issue with that, and I would love to have her on, she would never come on, but again, as a law professor to walk you through it, I think she would say, if you have an issue with the decisions that are being made by the chief executive of the United States, you should hold him accountable. And the way that you would hold him accountable is by impeaching him for failing to apply the law.
A couple of things. One is the contention of the Biden White House is that putting up this razor wire makes their job harder, which is crazy. Like this is so there's on the one hand there's a bad, now you could say,
it's a dispute over what the job is, right? That's why it's ultimately the question to me is, who is the decider as to what the job is,
right? But I mean, it's a function of, can you tell the state of Texas, like what else can you tell the state of Texas without trampling on the state's rights here, right? I mean,
this is why we had a civil war. I mean, honestly,
can you tell them, oh, you know what, you actually have to give us 10 miles of land near the border for entry? It's like, well, is that congressional statute, or is that just the executive branch? So I don't think it's, there's a reason. So what I was going to say to you is, I mean, there's a reason this is a 5-4, right? If this was 9-0, we'd feel very differently. I think Alito, and I think Thomas, and I think, what's the guy from the blonde hair? What's his name?
Kavanaugh.
Alito,
no, not Kavanaugh. Thomas.
I was thinking of the other guy.
Gorsuch.
Thank you. Neil Gorsuch. What they would say about this, I think, is that this is, that this isn't a specifically, like, putting razor wire down in Texas is not a specifically federal issue. The state of Texas can do this wherever it wants to in the state of Texas. It'd be one thing if they were saying, oh, we're going to take people and unilaterally deport them all on behalf of the United States government, as great as that may sound to some people. Like, that's clearly abrogating a federal prerogative, I think. But to put down razor wire on your side of the river, it's like, well, the state of Texas gets to make determinations about things like that all the time. So that's, I mean, like, why do you think Alito would have said you can't cut the wire? Why did Alito say you can't cut the wire?
We don't have written opinions.
No,
right?
I know. That's what I'm saying.
So
I'm telling you, Barrett, do the Alito.
I'm telling you what I think Amy Coney Barrett's answer would be, because I think that's the precedent that she's setting. I think John Roberts is just trying to avoid political controversy. But
what do you think the Alito explanation would be?
I think the Alito explanation would be that it does not directly infringe on the federal government's ability to implement the immigration policy of its choice, and that Texas has the right to protect its sovereignty and soil from a foreign invader.
I think that's. Oh, I mean, yes, I agree.
Yeah. I think that would be his argument, succinctly put.
I think that's a compelling argument. Now, I know it's 5-4, but I mean, to me, you sit here and you say the whole, because this is why interfering is the whole, because Texas can put if Texas wants to build a wall in Texas, Texas can build a wall in Texas, right? There has to be something. Now, when you get to the actual border itself, now I forget even how this, but there's like, it is federal territory, right?
The
question the guy asked before, I didn't mean to be dismissive of it. He does have a point when he said, how far inland can they make these determinations? This has to be this has been litigated before where you had border stops effectively that were 100 miles from the border. And people
Yeah.
were like, well, hold on a second. How are you doing border stops 100 miles from the border, right? So,
And what's fascinating about this too, Buck, is I mean, one, if you're a history nerd like I am, you go all the way back to the nullification controversy, right? During South Carolina pre-Civil War, basically said we can nullify laws that the federal government passes that we as South Carolinians do not support. And then, and again, this is being very legal nerd, but a lot of people don't realize this. The southern states, when they seceded, Jefferson Davis hoped that he was going to be arrested for seceding he hoped that it was going to go before the Supreme Court because his belief and the belief of many southern states in the 1860 timeframe when they seceded, was that every individual state had the constitutional right to withdraw from the United States government. And subsequent to the Civil War, that's been taken away. But coming out of the Dred Scott decision and all these other things.
It is interesting, isn't it? I mean, we thought we had a God-given right to secede from Great Britain. So you get into some deep philosophical stuff here.
No,
the British were not happy. They thought we were their people.
Correct. And the people who were in the South, many of them said, to your point, historically, we are doing the same thing to the United States that the United States did to Great Britain. That is, when you believe that the government no longer represents you, you are not bound and determined and obligated to remain a member of the Union. And so each of these southern states voted, the people of those states voted to secede and join the Confederate States. And Abraham Lincoln said, no, you cannot do that, and invaded. And we had the war over whether or not that was allowed. And now it has been determined that you cannot secede. So this is, to me, a natural outgrowth of the battle of states' rights, right? Which we have continued to fight for some time over what does the state have the obligation and ability to do. And ultimately, this comes down to who has the decision.
Well, this is, you brought up nullification, and I think that what the American people are seeing is that the Biden administration's policy at our southern border is de facto nullification of congressionally passed statutes on immigration.
Which
that
is why I
on.
think Joe Biden should be impeached based on what's going on at the southern border.
I mean, I kind of agree. I just feel like, we're going to impeach him. He's not going to get removed, and it's going to be this. You create a martyr out of him. The politics.
That's
of
the
it
truth. And I understand you can take that political step. I mean, the impeachment has become just sort of a de facto, sort of like stamp of disapproval because you're not going to get 67 votes in the Senate to remove anybody.
Here's what's really different, and I think very important right now about the immigration debate and why this is really becoming a problem for Democrats. And they know it. That's why they're trying to do this Senate bill.
And by the way, I think this ruling is bad for them too.
Yes. Absolutely. Look, Texas is playing a brilliant hand here. They're trying to secure the border, and if they're not allowed to secure the border, it's very obvious. It's because the Biden administration is saying, hey, Texas, you can't secure the border, right? So there's no win here for the Biden team. It's
hard for them to argue that Republicans are to blame for border lack of security when Greg Abbott is trying to shut down the border and Biden is going to the Supreme Court to keep it open.
Yeah, and I would just say the big difference right now and in this year about how this is going to play out is that because of the migrants, the illegals in all these cities that are living on the streets, that are breaking city budgets, that are overwhelming emergency rooms and schools and everything else, people see this problem now in a way that they know it is their problem. I think for a lot of people before, illegal immigration was a theoretical issue for them. But doesn't matter where you live, when you see the financial impact of illegal immigrants in major cities, you understand that this has a national impact and is going to affect the future of the country. It's going to affect goods and services that are given to us by the, or services rather, and the welfare state of the government. So it's a big problem for them. They can't just make this problem go away.